Okay, let's see. Here we go. Sean Foley Performance Academy coming up live, first time ever. You've got to. You've just got to. This is a cool. There we go. Now he's coming in.
There it is.
There we go, brother.
Yeah.
Sean,
I
how's it
thought that
going?
was never going to work, mate.
Hey, we got it to work. No problem, brother.
I know, because my 8-year-old's too busy doing homework right now, so he wouldn't have been able to lend a hand.
Oh yeah, that's what I kept saying. I said, get your son. He'll help you out. He'll help you out. How you doing, man?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. We chatted a little bit before we got on, and you got to tell everyone what you said. You got boys, and you're hanging out at home with them all the time.
Yeah, well, I think it, one, it's really nice for me because, since they've been born, I've traveled probably 20 weeks a year.
Yeah.
So I missed a lot of games. I missed a lot of things. Now, some of that's fine because you know what? One of the key things you can do as a father is get them ready to go out and deal with life, which is going to be basically on your own anyhow. So
Yeah.
it's not always a bad thing, right? I mean, obviously, I love what I do. I love my guys. I still feel when I wake up out there, regardless of the country I'm in, I'm excited to still go and do it. I think when I lose that, I'll probably hang it up because it's just too much of a sacrifice and it's too difficult if you didn't feel that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
to be able to, my boys only played golf one time in their whole life until this happened. Now they've been on the golf course. I mean, we literally live 40 feet away from the 14th hole. And they've been to the range once. And in the last 2 weeks, they've been 12 times.
That's
So,
kind of cool.
yeah. So and it basically came from a lack of communication. They didn't think I wanted to come home from work and go to the range. And I didn't think they wanted to play. So
Yeah.
they did. So we've been doing that. And that is the most challenging 2 lessons of my whole life so far.
Just wait till your wife starts playing.
Yeah. Well, that's how I met her, actually. She was a great student.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. So that's how I met her 19 years ago. So that's not difficult, but the two of them, they don't listen to me, but I think that just means they might be future tour players, mate.
No tour players listen to you, Foles. No tour players.
Well, so if I can get 20% in there, the thing is, right, you're trying to help people. At the same point, you don't want to limit their own sacred understanding of what it is they're doing. That's the danger, right? Like there's teaching beginners and then, people who have played for a while. And when it comes down to it in life, everyone's stuck in their own understanding of it. So for me, when I go to the range, it doesn't take me long to hit the ball quite nicely because I have a lot of understanding. The difference is the ability to do it over and over again is not there because I don't really neuropathologically, I intellectually understand it, but it's that deeper intelligence that Tiger and Serena and Simone and Rose and Annika and all these people, that's where they live, right? So it's like,
yeah.
How do you improve someone, but at the same point, not take away from what makes them so great? And I think that's the $10 million question, really, because if you could figure that out, you'd be worth at least that.
Yeah. I currently teach a guy who's really good. He's played on the tour, and I said to my wife a couple of weeks ago, I said, if I could manage to turn the person off, I could really help them.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's a
tricky,
fantasy
right?
world. It's not real.
No, it's tricky because, obviously, you look in school and there's math and there's this and there's that. There's no class that should be started in kindergarten on human communication. And so what happens is so many people get lost in this, fictitious narrative in their head, and they don't really see how strong that narrative is. And so for me, you know, with a player, sometimes by the time you work with a player, they've had 3 or 4 different coaches.
Mm.
And so you start to get into danger zone, right? Because what if the guy started out and he was kind of flat with a bowed wrist and he got underneath it and went down the line and hit big draws. And he got all the way to the PGA Tour doing that. And then along the way figured that if he could hit a pull cut, that would be better. And so as he goes from that big high push draw to kind of a mid-flight pull cut, in between, in the middle, he hits, like, the curves become way less, the distance control becomes better, but you always have to be paying attention for when the cure becomes the cancer.
Mm.
And I made that mistake with Sean O'Hare. We couldn't miss a shot for a year and then got to the point where we could not keep it out of left trees. And I didn't adapt fast enough in 2010 to understand, like, I kept trying to fix the old miss with what we originally did, but the miss now was coming from us doing too much of what we were doing. And unfortunately at that time, I didn't have enough understanding of the principles, as really no one did too, because I mean, we all had ideas, right? Like, I've never told anyone to get the club in front of them, not my whole life, not one time, never.
Mm.
Okay, that just never made sense to me. And when people tried it, actually, I would say this, it made too much sense to me. So when someone felt stuck and I said, well, all right, well, if I look at what my heroes are saying, right? So my heroes are all the big tour teachers. You know, get it in front of you. And then I start to notice, like, man, that's getting way worse. So what if I do the opposite and do this? So it's funny, when guys look stuck, they have room. And when they look like they have room, they're stuck. So it's just catching up with common sense and these little commonalities, but always knowing that you know what a good golf shot sounds like and what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, I still probably use that the most. Hey, give this a try for a sec. You know, what do you think about that? And then hopefully the student can say to me, okay, I'll do that, but what if I did it doing it this way? Perfect. That's what I want. Because have you ever spent any time with Will Wu?
I've not.
All right. Well, Will Wu is you know Scott Lynn, right?
Yes.
So they're close mates. Will is at, is it USC or Cal? He's a PhD in motor skill learning. So you should get him on this for sure, because it's
that'd
really
be cool. Yeah.
The thing is, I love to listen to Will because so many times you see them doing it and then you see them get on the course and not be able to do it. And so I don't think it's as mental as everyone thinks. I think, one, we're not learning it properly. 2, I don't think it's mental. I think it's environmental. So how many right-handed players have you coached who are good players who really struggle hitting driver on it into the wind, like into off the left wind?
Oh yeah, the worst.
Right?
The worst.
It's because that's not a golf shot. That's not a golf swing. That's a skill. It's a different skill. And to me, the guys who do it the best, they hit kind of on the border of a semi pull hook. But no one ever practices hitting a semi pull hook.
Yeah.
So if you went into 20 miles an hour off the left and hit a shot that held and was gorgeous, because you can't really hit a push draw, because a push draw is going to start right of your intended target line. So as you've looked at with wind and you look at the momentum and the force of the wind, the ball's going to have to work harder as it's slowing down to come back into it. So it's technically a pull. It's not a push draw of anything.
Yeah.
So my point is, if the guy was on the range and hitting that shot, it would look gorgeous right down the left side. The wind would hold it up. It'd be great. But if the wind dropped, every single player that I've ever coached, if he hit that shot, I mean, he may not slam his club, but he's going to look like he wants to.
Yeah.
So I think when you work with certain players, like I had 3 of my young kids yesterday, and 2 of them are going to go to Arizona State, one in the fall, one in the next fall. And all we really discussed was, you know, those kind of skill shots that they need to be able to hit. So he says, how do I hit it with into the wind where I don't get too much spin? And I said, well, one, it's not really spin. It's just basically slowing the ball down and it's increasing lift. So what do you like to do? Well, I like to play it back and hit down on it really hard. So many people have been so successful doing it that way, right?
Mm.
And so even if it burns out or it's not efficient, they become efficient within the inefficiency, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So when I got him to understand, well, what if you played it with more club, with the ball up in your stance, and worked on being shallow with less loft? And right away, it's like, well, I mean, how many, if he works at it, and he will, he's a fantastic hitter, how many tournaments will that help him in? How many shots will that help him in? But right now, he's like a little under at 6, but who cares? Like, who hasn't been?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the danger with 6 and 7 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 is you have people who are anatomically way different, right? I mean, let's look at the body, for example. Like, what's imperative in order for someone to hit a golf ball as far as physiologically, right? So how many people who come to your golf schools make those moves, one, because they don't understand it, every one of them, right?
Yeah.
2, so you provide that and you do a great job. You get in there, you say boom, boom, boom. And then you say, okay, now what can they not do physiologically? So if you look at Rory McIlroy and Cameron Champ, all right, because they will fill these social media platforms, right?
Mm.
They're so much like Nolan Ryan, where they're hitting it so hard, but looking like they're doing it so easily, right?
Yes.
So Nolan Ryan had a saying, like how he was able to learn in his 40s to still pitch as fast as anyone. And he said, as I got older, I learned how to throw hard easy.
Mm.
Right?
Efficient. Yeah.
Now, we know that ball is moving at the speed it is because of force.
Yes.
Right? So how are they doing it? Well, I've been fortunate enough to work with chiropractors who've treated both of them, and often. And they're real unicorns, man. They're unicorns.
Yeah.
Okay? When you watch Rory and Rory gets really lean like he is right now, he does look like the guy who's about to jump up onto the rings at the Olympics. The build is identical. If you look at the tendons and the muscles, it's identical. So if you look at the mobility that those guys have, because really when Cameron talks about how far he hits it, all he does is says, when I get to the top of my swing, I feel like all my pressure's in my left leg, but my upper body is behind the ball. And from there, as I clear my hips, I just turn into a slingshot. Right?
That's kind of what it looks like.
But he's not talking about jumping. He's not talking about doing anything like that. Right?
Yeah.
Because remember, a ground reaction force is exactly what that is. It's a reactive force.
Yeah.
So, we can see a trifecta as we saw at coaches camp, and it's Rosie and Tommy Fleetwood, and people go, those guys really flush it. I've worked with wounded warriors a few times, and I've seen guys who are paralyzed from below the waist down hit it 265 yards in the air sitting in a specialized golf cart.
Yeah.
I've seen wounded warriors with 2 what is the word for what do they call it with the legs when it's mechanical?
Oh, as soon as you said it, I lost it too.
Right?
I know what you mean.
Okay.
An artificial limb.
Perfect. Carry it 300 yards.
Wow.
But I've never seen anyone without 2 arms be able to hit the ball that well. So, like Bob Toski's not far off me.
Prosthetic, yeah.
Right, prosthetic, perfect. Thank you, Jordan Berg. Is not Bob Toski's not that far off, but if you listen to the young instructors today, they'll go, man, what did he know? I even hear guys talk about Butch Harmon. And it's like, are you out of your mind right now? You don't have to understand every single thing in the universe to be able to help somebody. There's different levels of understanding. There's intellect, there's intelligence, there's creative intelligence. There's all these different things.
Wisdom.
100%. And wisdom comes from experience. So, unfortunately, a lot of instructors, they've been able to grow up, watching you and George and Dana, and gosh, the list is forever, right? Of all these great coaches who have spent their whole life, Liam, all these great guys, right? guys I've known forever. Scott Lind, Sasho, all these people.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm happier. No, I feel that I learned more being able to work in golf schools for 3 years and teaching to like just make a living and coaching and coaching and coaching and coaching because, you know, success leaves clues, bud. And
For
so
sure.
I could look at stuff that I said 15 years ago and been like, oh man, why'd you say that? But the fact of the matter is that kid won back-to-back Canadian amateurs. So it isn't really what you're saying, it's what you're doing with someone.
Mm.
And so the point on Instagram of before and after, this was before my lesson, this is after my lesson. Like, what are you trying to say? Like, to me, there's an education standpoint to it. So if you look at someone like Jeff Smith, he does some really nice stuff. I mean, he's literally giving free information out, as you have with wedges and all that, right? But when I look at other things and I'm critical of it and analyze it, because look, I'm as insecure as anyone. I just became secure with that. I want to help people understand where the need for external adulation comes from and how you might as well be in a jail cell if that's what you're after.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So to me, the platform of Instagram, obviously, how long has Instagram been around for?
Quite a while.
Right? And
Maybe
so
8 years.
yeah, I remember one time I gave a lesson to this guy, didn't know who he was. His name was Kevin Systrom. And so he said, you know, are you on Instagram or can I follow you? And I said, no, I'm not on Instagram, dude. I'd like to keep my life private. I said, I don't think it's that useful. And he goes, oh, that's funny. I invented it.
Oh, nice guy.
Well, I didn't, you know, at that time I looked at it and as soon as I found out that people could like change the way they looked and the lines on their head and how their eyes were, it's like, that is crazy to me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I think when it comes down to it with the golf and with the players, Andrew, it's just such a challenge and such a difficult task. And I think that's probably what I enjoy the most, you know, the most about it is trying to break through to a guy. And look, in my estimate with good players, if you can often make them think that they came up with it, then fine.
Mm.
So it doesn't really matter to me whose idea it is. I'm trying to get them to shoot a better score, which in what ends up being is that I make more revenue and more profit. So it doesn't matter to me. But I think that at this point, to all the golf coaches watching is, you know, find a chiro or a physio or a great trainer in your area and start to learn about anatomy and physiology, because we are throwing around very complex ideas without real understanding. So on my right leg, of course, there's going to be internal, external hip rotation, but how important is it that my ankle would not be pronated, it'd be neutral? What if I can't externally rotate my tibia or my femur? There's got to be ways around that.
Mm.
So sometimes instead of making somebody do something they can't, you can maximize something that they already do well. So if that person has that, if he really gets focused and works on getting good mobility in his scaps, his neck, and his thoracic spine, then you can go past that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure. For sure.
Because look, some people are not going to want to straighten their right leg and their backswing and turn their pelvis. I've found a lot of players, and I think what they're discussing is they're talking about they're losing that proprioception and mechanoreception and that feeling of the big toe in the ground. So when they want to feel that, they kind of just don't move. And then that's causing shear forces through the lower back, because the lumbar spine isn't supposed to really, lumbar spine is supposed to help us deadlift. It's not supposed to help us rotate. So, you know, it's just, I just can't believe after all this time, bud, we're not bored. Because you'll never get bored doing it.
Exactly. There's so much. Sean, would you say that over the years and just watching you from early days to now, would you say you've become more people, individual centric, and less golf swing, this is how to swing centric?
Yeah, I think everybody would. You know what I mean? I mean, you start out, remember, like to me, there's like the gods, right? So there's like Ledbetter, Butch Harmon, all those guys, Bob Tosky, Jim Flick, right?
Yeah.
If I'm ever in a money match and I have to hit it in the fairway, I literally get on my knees, dude, and never miss a shot. It goes dead straight every time. Okay. My friend says, well, you're not making ground reaction forces. I'm like, well, technically my knees are pushing into the ground.
Yes.
Right. But
yes, you are.
So and then getting into the golf machine, and then into, parts of Morad. But, I've been influenced by, I don't know who I haven't been influenced by.
And I love that about you. I really do. I think that's part of what's made you who you are, Sean, is you're always, if you believe someone knows what they're talking about, you're over there listening. You're asking questions.
No, 100%. And I remember the one time, this is really funny, so I met Scott Lynn in 2007, and he started talking this stuff. And look, I think what happens to people sometimes is, because we don't understand the gripping narrative of our insecurity, as soon as someone starts saying something that could technically eventually help us, it's scary to go in.
Yeah.
It's scary to go in, right? It's really scary to go in because, you have this idea in your head of what you think works, and then you go back to it and you think, like, man, I was wrong. Well, yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Because to me, you're either learning or you're learning. And so all I want to do is provide that person in front of me with the best opportunity. Okay, whether they're paying me or not, I treat it exactly the same. So of course I'm going to look at this and look at this and look at this. And then with many of my tour players, when it's come to a point of something that I understand, but not really as well as someone else, all the people that I've helped hire for my players who are very competent at what they do. I am a spiritual coach and I'm a full swing guy. I don't know the first thing about putting. I don't. It's not interesting to me. Okay. But my friend,
I'm with you, I must say.
But John Graham, Phil Kenyon, David Orr, all those guys, right? They're great at it. Now, David Orr is going to be a better match for another guy. Phil's going to be a better match for another guy. A guy may be too busy to take a player on, so I don't think that's going to be the right way. It's, that's the key, is my job as a coach is to know enough about what everybody knows, so I know who's competent and who's just a marketing phony, and that's abundant. That's out there, right?
Yeah.
So, and then try to uplift guys, I can literally think of like 10 to 12 careers that I've really helped. And that means as much to me as making a check. Like, remember, you got two bank accounts, man. You have one at the Bank of America and you have one in your soul. And, for me, if the one at Bank of America says $1 billion, but the one in my soul says insufficient funds, then I'm not doing it right.
Yeah. True, eh?
So it's, of course we want to make a living. Of course we want to do all those things. But if you think about what's essential, right? If you think about what's essential, and I remember Rory in, January, I was talking to him and he started discussing essentialism. And I thought, oh, wow, Rory is getting into that. Once he continues to read that stuff, and then he got into Aurelius and a lot of the philosophers, I thought, man.
Stoicism.
Yeah, when this man's mind clears, or he understands he's been the one filling it up. Because remember, nothing's coming from outside of you. It can't. It's your interpretation of what's outside of you. I thought, man, it's going to be crazy. And then we see statistically one of the best years we've seen. But the only thing that can stop Rory is Rory. The only thing that can stop Andrew is Andrew.
Yeah.
And so I spend most of my time when I'm working with players, just listening to them and hearing what they say. I had a player the other day and he's like, man, I'm just suffering off the tee. And I said, I don't know, man. There's kids with leukemia who are suffering. You need to change your language.
Yeah.
And so people don't understand language and the effect that it has on imagery and the effect that has on memory and then the effect that has on reactions. So, yeah, I love the golf swing. It's like one of the coolest things in the world. It's so difficult and intriguing, and everyone looks like they're doing it differently, but I'd say the efficient ones aren't doing it that much differently. But I think from an overall standpoint, it's about human movement. and then it's about physics. So to me, it's kind of a combination of, I guess at this point now, I would probably bank the most on Craig Davies, who's been my roommate for 19 years on tour. He studied human movement in and out. Obviously, breathing and the diaphragm, the role that the internal organs play. So osteopaths being able to adjust players' internal organs changes massive trunk rotations. There's all these things that I've learned. And sometimes I think the danger with all the knowledge is that you have too many options when you're sitting with that person. So I learned from a friend of mine, Dr. Ara Supaya, who I think probably a lot of people on here have seen on the Golf Channel. And Ara works as a medical doctor for 12 or 13 different players. Started with VJ back in the day when he turned 40. And Ara's a brilliant guy. He's from Malaysia, became a sports medicine doctor in England, and then came to America and became an emergency room doctor. And so I just love to talk to people who have done things at high levels. Two things seem to happen, right? Obviously, their passion and curiosity is there. Another part of that first point would be they do it for free. They do it often for free, right?
They love it.
Right? And second, they read a lot. Most people I meet who really impress me are massive readers.
Yeah.
And
do you read a lot, Sean?
I nonstop. As much. Really? Look, that's the one thing I've seen some things where people are like, this is giving me time to reflect, to get my life in the right place. Look, there's so many people suffering right now. I don't really want to discuss like the positive effects of this Corona thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But if it did anything for all of us, it has given us time. Now, I think for the most part that people stay super, super busy. And they're always on, and they're always on, and they're always on, and they're always on. Because when they slow down, it gets really, really noisy in their head. So we stay busy to run from the failure of paying attention to our own personal truths. And so
could we just write that one down? I love that. That's like Marcus Aurelius there. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, those guys have been a big part of my life since I was a little kid. So I was really lucky, man, to have a dad who not only made it mandatory, but every time I looked at him, he was doing it. Was always reading. So I used to get grounded. Like all the time. Like it was my job to get grounded. Okay. Yeah, I did a lot of dumb shit, mate. I wasn't a bad kid. I never was like mean to people, but I tried to push the.
He did crazy boy stuff.
Yeah, something like, push the envelope a little bit too much, right? But so when I got grounded, I was allowed to stay in my room or go in his library. So I had all these books, I remember looking one day and seeing a book by Mandela, Abbie Eban, Mother Teresa, Mein Kampf by Hitler, all these books. So when I used to just sit in there, I would just read. And it's amazing when I look back at, because I wasn't very good in school and wasn't that interested in it. He said, look, just pass. That's all you got to do is just pass. But I'm going to educate you. So watching 60 Minutes, Peter Jennings every night at 6 o'clock. And the funny thing is, for a lifetime D student who had 7 semesters of summer school in a row, right, I've sat there after corporate events with CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world and been able to wax poetically about these things they're discussing. Whereas, technically, the way society defines intelligence, or not intelligence, but intellect and being smart, not really that guy. But everything is everything. Everything is relatable. So I think if you understood the nuances and the ins and outs of how supply and demand economies work, then that will help you with cause and effect in the golf swing. I think everything is so related. And I think that what's been happening it's been happening forever, right? It's as old as time, but social media has aided and abetted in the ability for us to divide ourselves from each other. when we couldn't be more interconnected. We're completely interconnected, and we see that at this time. So
Yes.
hopefully what could come out of this, and I would always veer on the side of hope than the side of not hope. Hope is an interesting thing, right? So my friend Jason Goldsmith, who created the Focus Band, you know Jason, yeah?
Yes.
Him and Henry created the Focus Band. But Jason is a world-class dude, like such a lovely guy. He's been in the Special Forces, in the Air Force, sold real estate, sold boats. I mean, this guy could do anything. He's like MacGyver. So he's worked with Justin Rose from when we were maybe 17th to #1 in the world, and got Rosie's process and did the same thing with Jason Day. So technically he's only worked with 2 guys and they both got to #1.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It is really, really helpful. And Rosie appreciates him and knows he's a brilliant guy and all that. But the thing that Jason, explained one day, he was talking about hope, and I had made a comment about hope. And then he was telling me a story about these rats in the lab. I think it was like maybe MIT, something like that. And when they put the rat, I can't get exactly what the story was, but I get the gist of it. So they put the rat in the water and the rat scrambled. And it scrambled for like 2 minutes and then just drowned. Okay? So they did it again. Next day, they put the rat in the water. And right around that time, they pulled it out. And then they put it back in, and now it swam for like an hour, and then it drowned. So they started doing it to the point where they could get the rats to swim up for like 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
Because they had hope that they would be picked out again. And that's just a rat's brain, right? But if you think about it, human beings versus everything else, if you put the embryos of like 25 animals next to each other, they look almost exactly the same. So everything's starting from that kind of infinite quantum energy, and then it grows into whatever it grows in based on its DNA, RNA, and the helix of memory, right? So you start thinking about that, and you're like, man, you know what? That's super, super interesting. If you look at Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and that first chapter, there's only 2 chapters, right? Second chapter is about logotherapy. I
like the first half. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not super into the second part. But I think it's difficult to discuss psychology and things like that. He was talking about it through his experience, and his experience was being in the death camps of the Nazis. Well, and he was a psychiatrist when he went in. So, I mean, that's like watching human behavior during a PGA Tour tournament, the Sunday of the Masters, right?
Yes.
Like, to me, until I can get my guys, like at our academy, we use Mark Bull to do all of our 3D stuff. And then I have used Mark with all of my players, right?
Yeah.
He's such a good dude. He's so smart, but he's just
lovely guy.
The best, right?
Yeah.
The best. And a real pro, right? Super pro. I'm just waiting for the time that I can get 3D feedback. And Mark will admit to this too, right? On the back 9 of a tournament with different wind directions.
Yes.
Because if you watch a guy hit into a net and then you watch him hit into the wind, man, the pelvis doesn't really move the same. It's quite a bit different, right? And that's why I want to know the environmental things. But getting players to understand, when you say you have mental issues, when I think of a mental issue, I think of like PTSD, I think of schizophrenia, I think of bipolarity, things like chemical imbalances. I don't think of people whose identity is their score, who've completely lost perspective on life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I love that word, perspective. And that's one of the positives that are coming out of this, certainly for me, is gaining perspective and looking at the big picture and understanding how it all fits together. And I think, and that's really what you were hinting at when you were talking to Rory. Once Rory starts to gain true perspective on what's happening, look out.
Yeah, because the thing is, look, I mean, he's fantastic. I remember the first time I ever saw him hit balls. It was my first time at the British Open when I was working with Stephen Ames. It was 2007. And I didn't realize that Stephen didn't practice in the rain. So I put all my gear on and walked out across the street from the bed and breakfast to the range and walked to the range. There was one person on the range. And I call the British Open the swing destroyer because every single time you go to the British Open, the wind's like 30 off the left every time. Okay. So by Friday, no one can stand properly. Everyone is like, balls moving back. They're getting this way. Now it's just getting towards the most likely right start line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you got guys and they're hitting the ball and they're obviously reacting to the wind conditions and they're not even doing it on purpose. They're like the shot that they hit, but their face is 2 degrees closed and their path is 3 to the right, and they're normally around 0. And you're like, yo, by the way, if you do that with a right to left wind, it's going to go out of bounds. So just make moves and stop trying to hit it so straight, right?
Yeah.
But I walk on the range, and then there's this kid, and back then he had like almost like that Jerry curl, right? And it was wet, and he's on the range, and he was under rain gear, so he didn't look as fit as he is now, but obviously he had the same engine. He's the same guy, right?
Yeah.
And then his girlfriend at the time was doing her math homework under an umbrella. And so I just stood behind him. Maybe, I don't even know for how long. But he just hit 4-iron after 4-iron after 4-iron. And then I introduced myself to him, and he was he's never been any different. Like through all the fame,
That's
money.
Cool.
See, here's the deal, right? When people say money changes people, it doesn't. I think money and power allows people to be who they've always wanted to be. Because I've known too many people who have become really successful. And if I see anything in them, I think they've been driven closer to humility than they have the other way. Right?
Yeah.
But there's so many of those guys, Ricky, Jordan, those guys, they're all just like I first met them. They still are the same way. Just with more battle scars probably, right?
Mm.
And I'm watching this kid hit these golf balls, and I've just never seen anyone make it look so easy. Then the kid makes however much money he made from Nike. He obviously won 4 majors right away. We all saw with Tiger how difficult it was for Tiger to not become so insular in such fame, right?
Yeah.
Remember, fame is, Instagram doesn't recognize this that well, but fame is hollow because it's still external adulation.
Yes.
And that the great ones don't need that. Like I don't need you to like me to like myself. I don't need, someone gives me a compliment. It's nice of them to say, but it doesn't really do much for my confidence. Just like all the criticism I've had, people say, how do you handle all that? Well, I can almost guarantee you that most people who criticize me never spent 10 minutes with me. So unfortunately, you get to see, you see and you hear and you see and you hear and you see and you hear. And that's what makes it so difficult for me now when I watch TV and I hear people talk about people, because I haven't met them yet, I just have no idea. So when people say, what do you think about that guy? Well, I don't know. Yeah, but you met him once. Yeah, but it doesn't mean I know him.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Remember, people, it's very easy in life, in our little 5 minutes. How are you? How's your wife? How's your kids? Within 5 minutes, it's very easy for people to all seem great. But
yeah,
this is not a time of ease and comfort. It's a time of obviously challenge and adversity to everybody. But that's really where the roots of understanding yourself come from, mate. Like you can't, like sometimes I have so much more fun when my players are struggling than when they're playing great. When they're playing great, I try to avoid saying anything, but technically I feel like I've been to the summit a couple times in my career, and it's not really a place that I like to be. It's freezing. There's no oxygen, and most climbers die when they go down, not when they go up. The descent's harder than the ascent, right? Especially the fact you're so tired now it's all eccentric going down. That's, that's not really what it is. I don't think we were meant to come down 29,000 feet. But the idea in that is I kind of feel like the most learning is happening at 20,000 feet in a total blizzard.
Yeah.
And that's like, I've yet to go on vacation and learn anything yet, So it's just trying to, it's trying to get people to be okay with not performing well. Like basically,
you say it often when I hear you talk, and you can be talking just to a regular golfer standing on the lesson tee, and the people that you'll mention Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela and all these people, and you look at how these people got to become so special. well, 9 times out of 10, they pass through great adversity.
Oh, dude, that's it.
Yeah.
The one thing about Mother Teresa that's really interesting, right, is there's a book out that I read years ago that's her letters to the Pope questioning God's existence at all.
Really?
So the person who's known to have the greatest faith of many people, right? I don't know how you merit, like who has more faith or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she just saw so much pain and suffering. Her life was constant that, right? That she really questioned at all the idea of goodness and a creator at all. So how can you have a strong faith if you don't question it? You know what I mean? How can
For
you
sure.
say you understand the golf swing if you don't question what you understand and then go find people with a PhD next to it who don't even play golf? I find that's really helpful, right? I like with Mark Bull, I like that he was a really great player and he's a biomechanist because he understands the jargon of golf speak, right?
Mm.
But a lot of those guys have really no preliminary bias. We all have biases in us that
Totally.
we don't
I've
even
noticed that
understand,
so
right?
much in the last few weeks. I've got this bias to how I do things and how I operate and how I like to go here and there at this time. And it's all been exposed and I've had to deal with it. We're all
Yeah.
dealing with it.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that what we know about essentialism, right? Obviously, water, food, shelter, exercise, sunlight, some money, some. There's been extensive studies on it. I don't even think it's $100,000, by the way. Okay, and then love.
Love. I'm glad you said that. I was going to add that if you didn't. Yeah.
Oh no, that was definitely going to be.
Got to be there.
So it's that if you have those things, then what else is there to it? So to me, it's about looking at it that way. And
yeah.
So what I've thought, like doing this is, and being with my boys, my sons, Quinn and Kieran, they're 11, 12. He just turned 12. I hate saying it. I still want to say he's 11. He's almost, it's not hard to do, but he's like nearly my height. So it's getting interesting. It just being able to spend so much time with him. And then with my wife, who's just a fantastic girl, I look and go, okay, do I need to go back to what I was doing in the way I was doing it? Because have I worked hard enough for 25 years to get to the point that knowing I have a window, your boys are already older. So my boys are 12 and 8. How long are they going to look at me like I'm Michael Jordan? How long do we have left with that, Andrew?
Yeah.
Couple, 2-3 years?
I'm not going to say, but you just ride it, brother.
So, of course, I still want my players to win majors, and I love my guys. I mean, Justin Rose is like, he's a family member to me. Yeah. Danny, Brendan Grace, Lucas Burgard, Cameron Champs has been like my golf kid, right? Mm-hmm. Ever since he was little. I always want to see those guys do what they can. But I think if we streamline it and do less together, we might get more out of it. Mm-hmm. And do it in different ways to where it isn't always at a tournament. Wednesday of the US Open and they're not hitting it good and making a mess of it because maybe they're not hitting it good because they're just not hitting it good. That's okay. Like, yeah, it's a pretty complex thing. So you would get lost in the variables of trying to understand why they're hitting it good or not hitting it good. It could get to sleep, it get to dehydration, memories. There's just so many things, right? So just looking at how we streamline it and be more efficient, because when I talk to Will, Will always discusses that when someone learns something on their own, it's more powerful than if they learn it from someone else. So that's where you have to really, disrupt your own ego, because there was a time when I first started with Tiger, I would say I was probably at my all-time most arrogant. And I felt I needed to be because
I
basically,
love that you make that statement, mate. That's awesome. Old time, most arrogant.
yeah. Well, the thing is to get better. If I didn't look in the mirror and understand that. See, here's how I got really lucky, right? I got lucky that Stephen Ames and Hunter Mahan and Sean O'Hare and Justin Rose, that kind of in my idea of what was the principles, they all kind of needed the same similar thing.
Okay.
But when I had started with Tiger, it wasn't the case. And so I had to really learn on the fly. And in doing so, you know what? I mean, as a coach, as a friend, as there's coach, there's the technical coach, there's the other part, right?
Mm.
So kind of my love for him, our love for one another, that support that I gave him when he was going through a time that very few people have ever been through. We've all had our bad times, but man, doing it in front of the world would be really, really different, right?
For sure.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I overcoached him, and he's the last person in the world who needs overcoaching, right?
Big picture, definitely. Yeah.
You could argue with Tiger that he is the greatest learner who's ever played the game. Just like Federer is the greatest learner who's ever played tennis, like Simone is the greatest learner. I think there's a point where there's some genetic aspects that kick into it, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot of Kobe. People say Kobe Bryant was great because he was 6'6". He had a 43-inch vertical. I mean, how many players in the NBA have had both of those? A lot.
Mm.
So what made him so incredible? I don't think it was that he was the Mamba and he was bloodthirsty. I just think that as that video he made of his letter to basketball that won the Oscar showed his deep love for the game, his dreaming of being great at the game. You know?
Yeah.
When he didn't have anything to use, so he put a bunch of chairs in front of him and dribbled around him. I mean, my son loves basketball, but if he's going to do that, I've got to take him outside and make him do that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, it's not fun.
I'm in the business of watching people try to maximize what they can do. So, look, if he just wants to play on his team at school and be decent and all that, then cool. He's going to understand to make the team. He's going to have to be good enough. He's going to have to practice enough. But it's just amazing when you go to these basketball tournaments and you see some of these kids and you watch them, and everyone always points to how fast they are, how much they are this way. Of course, they have a genetic ability to be fast. They have a lineage of athletes in their family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the competitive nature of Jordan Spieth, it goes back like on the men and women's side in his family, like 4 generations of people who participated in sports.
Yeah.
Right? So you can kind of see where that type of idea comes from. But, you know, it's about this competition we have like within ourselves and to overcome the doubts and to do that. So you have to look in the mirror and you have to be honest. You have to be introspective about it. And, you know, that's a scary first step to take because you may not find what you like. But over time, you'll notice that there's a tranquility that comes because you're not just an extension of your own bullshit. And so I think that's just really, really imperative. I've loved during this time that Lucas Beauregard and Alex Levy are reading some of the books that I've been begging them to read since I first started working with them.
What books you got? What books have you pitched at them?
Well, for me, as a starting point, right? Because if I was to give them a book, like I just finished a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Kanaham, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics and Psychology. If I give them that book, they're going to go 2 pages and go, I'm out. Yeah. And I get it. I get it. I mean, it took, I'm on the 3rd chapter and then I've read this. It's like the golf machine, this book. I read the different chapters, but I still only understand about 5% of what he's saying, but that 5% is really helpful to me.
Yeah.
So the books that I got them reading first is The 4 Agreements by Ruiz. And then from there, I want them to probably read the book about 10 times and understand those agreements that they need with themselves. And I just really think that that's just to me, a great introduction to a golf lesson of almost any skill level is ball flight.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's that
Any skill level.
Man, if you understand ball flight, you're in a really good place now. Because if you do understand ball flight, and then also understand that, Jack Nicklaus always says that, when he wanted to draw, he swing to the right. When he wanted to fade it, he swing to the left, and he start the ball, with the path and curve with the face. It does feel like that.
Yes.
Right?
For sure.
It does feel like that. But being able to get people to recognize just those things is so helpful. I mean, how many amateurs who top it have you helped by teaching them what angle of attack and loft does?
Yeah.
It's right away.
Right away.
So to me, they only top it because they think they need to get under it. Most anything in our life that's been on the ground, we were socialized to pick up. Pick it up. Don't leave it behind you, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as, or they're a little bit afraid of hitting the ground because they've hit the ground wrong before, and it sent information up the nerve to the brain going, oh, no, I don't like that. We're not doing that again. So if you can get through that point, did you know you need to hit down on the ball with loft? Oh, I didn't know that. Almost right away, you see it. You're like, wow. And they're like, well, that's amazing. Right?
They love it.
Yeah, well, they all don't mind hitting driver, do they? Right?
True.
Right?
True.
My sons already go straight to driver. I mean, that thing is teed this high, and it makes them look like they're not as bad as they are, right? But even teaching them's been fascinating, dude, because they're complete beginners. And I've been sitting on the cart for 2 weeks. And the first day I had them, I videoed them, and they didn't really hit the ball great, but they hit some really nice shots. But they just did some really nice things, like their sequencing. They're both nice athletes. The little one's a really good athlete. So their sequencing was really nice. They both kind of picked it up, and then it laid down a little bit as they started to rotate on the way back. But the whole idea of impact or what wasn't really there. So I said, all right, I'm just going to watch these kids.
Good idea, Dad.
Every day I kept videoing them, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Right?
Yeah.
They now took it to the top, and they started leading with their torso, and it was really, really, really fascinating. So I had to, at that point, I said, okay, guys, I'm only going to speak if I have to, but let's do this. And they were like hesitant and, Dad, I don't know. And my son's grip turned to where it's like, it looked like he was riding a Harley Davidson, like underneath the grip. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? So I was watching, and I was like, maybe I should call Mike Adams to ask him if this grip is okay. Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking, well, with this grip, I'm just have to speed his hips up a little bit. And I'm like, maybe I just get Mike to coach him. Nah, you know what? Maybe I'll get this guy to coach him. Maybe I'll fly this guy and coach him. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be an incredible challenge. And, and it has been. But once I kind of gave him the idea and showed him some videos, and I kind of basically just Furicked both of them. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
I Furicked both of them, and then just told them to keep the club really low through the ball to the finish. And we went out the other day, and it looked like they've been playing for a couple of years. Then we went out the next day, it looked like they never played again. It's understanding that process is pure learning, and you need variability. If you don't have inconsistency, the world is full of people who are trying to become consistent all the time. The greatest are the ones who are the most accepting of the inconsistency of the day-to-day operations. It doesn't really get in their head. Brooks Koepka said it the best, right? He said, I don't know about any of you in here, but I guess I just understand how difficult golf is. And that's after he just won 4 out of 7 majors.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's why on the course, he just looks like he's so within himself and kind of just out there playing 18 holes, is because he recognizes on Thursday he'll feel like he's never going to miss a shot again. And then on Friday, he's scrambling the first 5 holes just to stay level par.
Yeah.
And can't really put his finger on it. But he has a foundation of things that he does, that he's done for a long time. Like Jack Nicklaus talks about it, right? He basically had the same lesson from Jack Grout from the time he was a little boy.
Yeah.
And so, is it the most efficient way to swing? A scientist may say not, but once again, if that's all he ever did, if that's the only pattern he ever presented to his brain, even if it's inefficient, he's going to do it at an incredibly efficient rate. And so, when you get players sometimes, and better players who come to you and you look at it, you're like when I had Brendan Grace come to me this year, if I think of my discriminate preference that I have, that I don't even know I have, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? But it's definitely more Hogan and Trevino than anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay?
For sure.
He shifts. Hold on, how can I do this?
Sean, just so you know, we got 1 minute, mate. 1 minute left, and I really want to save this because I know people want to watch. So
yeah, okay, no. You know what? We'll I think now that I have this now that I'm gonna start doing Instagram, I'm probably just gonna end up doing stuff like this because I enjoy this.
I love this. This is so cool, mate.
And all the people clicking on and stuff, man. To them, that we can do this for them is really cool because they're all and if we got to listen to them, we learn a ton too. So it's like we're all in this together, man. If you're in this game, you're fortunate. So just peace to everybody,
Sean, you are the best, brother. I love you. We got to get a cooler full of ice cold Heinekens one day and just go and tell stories.
Yeah, these theories didn't all raise in sobriety, mate. So there you go.
Take care of yourself and your family, mate.
Okay, how do I log off, dude?
Thanks for coming on. I'll show you.
All right, thanks.